The Bruins apparently are still in on two major trade pieces in this NHL offseason. I thought they might have been out on this, but apparently they are still in. The first name that comes up is Jordan Kyrou, someone who has been mentioned quite a bit as a trade chip throughout this NHL offseason, but nothing has happened so far. Kyrou's a really interesting one. St. Louis is a really interesting case, okay, because they're in a situation where they're looking to get rid of, their highest earner in Jordan Kyrou and probably their most skilled offensive player in Jordan Kyrou, but they feel like they need to do it. They've got young talent. They've got guys like Jimmy Snuggerud. They're looking to get more ice time for some of these guys. They're not trying to tie up all their cap space into someone like Jordan Kyrou. This is where the Bruins come in because I'm not going to lie to you guys. I thought this was a bit of a long shot, even as recently as like last week. But all the reports are still out there that, hey, we know the Blues haven't done anything yet, but they are still looking to shop Jordan Kyrou, guys. Like, that's the reports now. And this all comes down to waiving a no-trade clause. And that's where I kind of stopped with the Bruins' interest because, like, who would waive their no-trade clause for the Bruins right now? That seems really silly. And it's not like they have $20 million in cap space of like, oh, yeah, I'll just waive my NTC there and just get a bag. That's probably not going to really happen with the Bruins either. They'll have some cap space next year that they can extend Jordan Kyrou if that were the case. But multiple outlets are reporting that Jordan Kyrou would waive his no-trade clause to come play for the Boston Bruins. Why? Beats the hell out of me. Sure does. But the Bruins need a guy like Jordan Kyrou. The Bruins need offensive skill. All this talk for years now about the Bruins need a center. That's all they need. They need a franchise kind of center. Chase the position. That's what the Bruins did in last year's free agency. They didn't go out and get the best point producer out there, which is what they really needed. They went out and got what they deemed was the best center and overpaid for Elias Lindholm. But really, when it comes down to it, the Bruins need talent. They need offense. They need goals, assists, and points. They don't just need a center. In fact, I saw this great graphic that highlights this entirely. This is from Instagram, Mark Hussey, out here on Instagram. By the way, if you want to follow the Cam Show on Instagram, at The Cam Show, where we post Instagram Reels every weekday. But look at this. Most points by a Bruins right wing since 2015. Of course, it's going to be David Pastrnak, number one, 833 points in the last 10 years. But how about number two, David Backes, who hasn't played an NHL game in years? Riley Smith, who would have been on the roster for one of those seasons. Chris Wagner, Jimmy Hayes. Jimmy Hayes isn't even with us anymore, guys. Like, at all. It's sad. It's brutal. But, like, that's what we're talking about here. Frank Vetrano, Justin Brazeau, Brett Conley, Lee Stepniak, Drew Stafford. 5 of the top 10 guys for most points for a Bruins right winger since 2015 aren't even in the league anymore. Now, I don't think they took into account that Jake DeBrusk played a little bit of right wing. But, like, come on. This is what we're talking about here. They don't just need a center. They need points. They need goals, assists, and points. Jordan Kyrou gives that to you. 70 points again last year. 70 points in 3 of the last 4 seasons. The only other season he didn't get there, he got like 66. 285 points in the last 4 seasons. That would put him second on that list by almost 150 points. Actually, almost 200 points. He would be in second place on that list. 36-goal season last year, third 30-goal season in a row. 15% shooting percentage. So unlike Morgan Geekie, that's something that's sustainable. And, not for nothing, the Bruins do have kind of the assets to pull off this trade. For most teams in the NHL, on the other side, the Bruins don't have the assets to pull off this trade. But for the Blues, they do. Because the Blues need depth. That's what killed them in that series against Winnipeg. And if they're going to be a consistent playoff team, they're going to need depth. That's why they're willing to part with someone like Jordan Kyrou, with a young core out there. They need some depth pieces because the Bruins are going to need to move some money around anyway to get a guy like Kyrou. So you send off Casey Middlestat, who, I mean, nobody wants, but neither do the Bruins, and Pavel Zacha, then maybe you're making that work. Jordan Kyrou had 70 points last year. Those two guys combined, Zacha and Middlestat, had 87 points last year. You're moneyballing it. You're making it up in the aggregate. And not for nothing, but you know who really likes Pavel Zacha? Jim Montgomery, the head coach now of the St. Louis Blues. And those are guys who can play up and down the lineup. Zacha can play on the wing as well as center. He gives you a good 200-foot game. I can't say very many nice things about Casey Middlestat, but he's got a pulse and he can give you 40 points. There you go. There you find the depth piece, and the Blues are able to get rid of a guy that they are still trying to shop. So it might seem crazy. It might. But this Jordan Kyrou to the Bruins thing could still be on. I think there are better fits for someone like Jordan Kyrou. You know, obviously the Bruins really need him. I think there's more fits somewhere else. You know, Montreal, for example. Everyone could use a 2C. Montreal would be a much better fit. But do they have the space? Do they have the flexibility? The Bruins kind of do, because they have a bunch of nobodies. They have a bunch of third and fourth liners. They can make that happen. I think they would trade Pavel Zacha and Casey Middlestat in a second, and maybe obviously a pick to go with that. And the Bruins have their flush of draft picks over the next couple of years. They do that in a second to get someone like Jordan Kyrou in here. So that's number one. Jordan Kyrou to the Bruins is still on. The one that I think is even more far-fetched, but is apparently still on, the Anaheim Ducks are still shopping Mason McTavish. I'm not really sure why, but they are still shopping Mason McTavish. And I talked about this on a show a week or two ago. I love Mason McTavish. I like Kyrou too. But you want to talk about filling all the needs that you have for the Boston Bruins, Mason McTavish does that. And a recent report has come out from The Athletic that says these four teams are going to be in on Mason McTavish. The Montreal Canadiens, the Calgary Flames, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Boston Bruins. Two teams in limbo, the Flames and the Bruins. The Red Wings are still sort of in limbo, but they're obviously closer to a playoff spot. They've been flirting with it the last couple of years. And the Canadiens, I still find to be a very, very interesting team. If they can make that work, that could really elevate them. But Mason McTavish is a guy I love. Okay? I did the whole reel and everything. Like, trade for Mason McTavish if you can. Trade for him in a second. 22 years old, so still very young on his entry level, basically, his NHL entry level contract. He's 22 years old, still a couple of years away from his prime. He's got the size that Don Sweeney and Cam Neely want at 6'1" and 220, but he's also got the production that I think Don Sweeney and Cam Neely often overlook for guys who are big. Mason McTavish gives you both. Second line center, bam, there you go. Could be a first line center for the Bruins tomorrow. 22 goals, 30 assists, 52 points in 76 games last year, and a plus minus of 0, which, take plus minus for what it's worth. I think a 0 plus minus for a team as bad as the Anaheim Ducks is really promising. Okay? That means he's got some defensive ability. Went number 3 overall, 3 seasons in the NHL. He's put together 140 points for a bad Ducks team. Each of those years, they were bad. That's impressive, man. And he gives you the center position. He gives you over 50% in the last 2 seasons in faceoffs. Career 49%, which he struggled with at first. That's something that's really tough for a lot of young centers to get used to at the NHL level, the faceoffs. He kind of hit the ground running. He's over 50% right now, which is exactly what this team needs. And there are still the rumors out there that he's upset with his role, that he doesn't want to take a lesser role for this Ducks team. And that came out after the Trevor Zegras trade. So it makes you wonder kind of what the talks are there internally with Pat Verbeek and now Joel Quenneville as their head coach on what Mason McTavish's role is going to be. You want to know what your role is going to be for an original 6 team in Boston? You're going to be the number 1 center, man. And because it's probably going to take something similar to what you'd throw to St. Louis, it'll probably take something similar in terms of trading Pavel Zacha and or Casey Middlestat and draft picks to go out and get this kid and extend him. But he doesn't want to play on a line with Chris Kreider and Mikael Granlund on the second line in Anaheim. How about playing on a line with Morgan Geekie and David Pastrnak on a first line in Boston? And being a huge part of this youth movement. See, that's what I would love about this for the Bruins. This is a long-term deal. Because again, we all know this. All of you watching this know it, unless you're like super diehard homer here. Like, they're not going anywhere the next 2 years. Unless they go out and do something they haven't done in almost 20 years and get the best free agent on the market and get Jack Eichel next year. They're not doing anything the next 2 years. They're not contending for a Stanley Cup. I think in 3 years, at the best, like, everything's going right, you're competing, like truly competing for a Stanley Cup. So why not make this a long-term deal? Get Mason McTavish in here, have James Higgins eventually be an understudy, and start to build that roster grassroots, because you got some prospects for the first time. And maybe it takes one of those guys going in the deal to get a Mason McTavish. Maybe it's Matt Poitras or Mason Lohrei or Fraser Minten. Maybe it takes one of those guys to get Jordan Kyrou, a guy in his prime. I'd love a Mason McTavish at 22 years old, playing a bit of that rock'em sock'em like you want it, guys, but actually producing points, which is what the Bruins really need. Again, I would do it in a second. I am interested to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. But the fact that Mason McTavish is still on the block, apparently, is great for the Bruins, but has to be concerning in terms of what the player's looking for. Because Anaheim can offer him a lot of money right now. And he doesn't seem to think that that's coming his way, but everyone else looking at it and seeing the Trevor Zegras trade for pennies on the dollar, okay, maybe they are freeing up some money for Mason McTavish. That guy is probably going to be part of their future. But he hasn't had it happen yet. That deal has not been made. And I know everyone's on the golf course right now, but if I'm the Bruins, I got to start kicking the tires here. Kyrou would be nice. I think McTavish is a better fit long-term. Just because of where you are right now, Kyrou's nice for a team that's kind of ready to take that next step. In fact, Anaheim would be a great spot for Jordan Kyrou if they didn't already go out and get 2 really veteran guys in Mikael Granlund and Chris Kreider. That would be a great spot. Again, I bring up Montreal, a team that made the playoffs last year. They're ready to take that next leap into real contention. Jordan Kyrou would be a good fit for them. But if you're looking at more of this long-term deal, like the Bruins are, with some flexibility, they've got some contracts they're ready to get rid of. They're going to have some cap space next year and are still looking to build a 22, 23-year-old Mason McTavish is probably the answer to that. I'm still surprised he's on the trade market too. Before you get in the comment section and say that, I'm stunned that these guys are still in the trade market. And frankly, I'm stunned that the Bruins are being thrown out into those trade talks for Jordan Kyrou and Mason McTavish through some reputable sources here. The Athletic, Frank Saravalli, for whatever you think about him, he is still fairly reliable. I think it's kind of crazy, but they would both make a ton of sense. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're in on all the Bruins trade rumors and Bruins news. We come at you every weekday live at high noon Eastern time, and then wherever you get your podcasts as well. I'm your host, Cam Stuart. Zach Burke keeps us on the air. Check out the other videos on the channel, talking everything going on in the world of Bruins, NHL, and Boston sports. It's coming to you live every weekday, high noon Eastern time, and then wherever you get your podcasts.